Have you ever wondered when to use email services? Have you ever wondered how to set email services up or the limitations of email services? In this video, Nadina Lisbon discusses Apex email services in Salesforce for your developer and architect journey. Welcome! It's Rachel and Jessica from 100 Days of Trailhead, the place where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, have fun, and invest in ourselves. Whether you are brand new to learning Salesforce and starting from the beginning, or mid-career and skilling up for that new opportunity, we are your trail guides here to support you with an itinerary to help you get where you're going. You are in the right place. If you are new to our channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so you can be notified when we release a new video. In the description below, you can find links on everything we mention in this video, in addition to links we find helpful like books that have helped us and our friends along our tech and Salesforce journeys. To find other helpful Salesforce and tech content, visit our blog at 100daysoftrailhead.com. In this video, Nadina Lisbon is discussing email services which can process the contents, headers, and attachments of inbound email. Nadina started her Salesforce career in 2014 as an intern at a startup focused on building a real estate application, which was a managed package on Salesforce. With the need to learn and solve the toughest problems, she quickly accelerated to be the lead Salesforce developer at multiple companies. Today, she works as a system capability and Salesforce architect for Tradeshift, holds numerous certifications with the goal of becoming a certified technical architect. When she is not hard at work, she enjoys hanging out at user groups, devouring knowledge in Trailhead, cooking, and spending time with her amazing family. Your quest, should you choose to take it, is to journey with us through the adventure of learning email services. Your quest begins now. So Nadina Lisbon, our very own Nadina, so excited to have her. So just a little bit about her. She started her Salesforce career in 2014 as an intern at a startup focused on building a real estate application on Salesforce. With a need to learn and solve problems, she quickly accelerated to the lead and/or main Salesforce developer at multiple companies, including her current position at Kabam. And if you guys want to ask her like what they do, it's really cool. Offline or DM her, I'm just saying. Today she holds 5 certifications, including the Platform Developer 2, Development Lifecycle and Deployment Designer exam. Her goal is to become a certified technical architect, and we support that.
Yes.
And share her knowledge so she can inspire her peers in the next generation. When not hard at work, she enjoys attending user groups. Thank you for that. And devouring knowledge in Trailhead and spending time with WWDUG. Let's welcome Nadina.
Thank you, everyone.
And if you guys have questions, just throw it in chat, and I'll kind of monitor that as we go through.
Okay, let me share my screen. Hopefully you're seeing the presentation.
We can see it.
Okay, email services, let's go. So tonight we'll talk about the what and the why of email services, the limits of email services, and then we'll do setting up email services. We'll discuss some common errors, how to set them up correctly, and just some little tips and tricks. So what are email services? Email services are automated processes that use Apex classes to process inbound emails. And so here I have a copy of the sample class that Salesforce gives you. And I highlighted a few things. So that implements messaging inbound email handler is what separates an email service class from regular classes, so that we can use the email inbound class. It has 2 methods, the messaging inbound inbound email and the messaging inbound envelope. So for the messaging inbound email, I have a little snapshot of the methods as well as the end. I have a reference to it, but basically you get the email's HTML body, the plain text body, the subject, if you do attachments, the to address and the from address. In the email envelope, just like a regular envelope, you'll get the to address and the from address. Notice that both of them have the to and the from. Why would we use an email service? So the majority of the times it's because we have limited integration capabilities. So sometimes we have legacy systems that don't necessarily support SOAP or REST API calls. We would want to use an email service. Or if we need to bypass a firewall issue. So some companies, are owned by other companies, and their IT group might be really strict on opening up access. And you just need to pass a small CSV file or a small text file. An email service can be used here because they can be locked down securely to specific email addresses and to specific domains. So that helps kind of mitigate the concern that most companies would have. If we need to carry out a specific business requirement that requires minimum user interaction, so we need to reply to an email to do a create, read, edit, delete on a record, standard record. So kind of like case to email, but we can do case to any object, or we can do email to any object. So if we need to unsubscribe from a newsletter in your campaigns, or we have applicants applying for a job and they need to attach their resume, that would be a good use case for an email service because there's not a lot of interaction that you need. They send the email, Salesforce will process it, add it to the records. We can create a task. We can even send out another email. So far, so good? Okay. So now let's talk about the limits. So we have a couple limits that we need to talk about. So the inbound emails, there's a processing limit. So it's the number of user licenses multiplied by 1,000 with a maximum of 1,000,000. So that's how many emails coming in to Salesforce that can be processed. So if you have a small user org, the limit's smaller, but for like enterprise clients, they get a higher number, but everyone has that maximum of 1,000,000. Not sure if you can increase that or not, but you probably could. And then we have the email size limit. So it cannot exceed 10 megabytes. And that's including the body, the text, the header, any attachments. And usually it's rejected and it would be sent back to the sender if it's too big. Also, it depends on the language and the character set. So if you're dealing with multi-language, certain languages are bigger, like German, Chinese, all those characters will count against that 10 megabyte limit. Then we go to the outbound emails. So sending an email outside of Salesforce to your client. We have the single email limit where it's a maximum of 5,000 external email addresses per day based on GMT. And then email sent declaratively, so with workflow process builders, they do not count against the limit. So send away. And then we have mass email, which Salesforce doesn't recommend that you do too many mass emails when you're doing email services. They usually recommend that you do an outside service like SendGrid or Mass Emailer. But the limit is based on your edition. So professional is 250, unlimited is 1,000, enterprise is 500. And then emails to internal users, unlimited. So if you ever need to send an email to a user, you would use their user ID and you could just send away. So that helps a lot because sometimes you just need to send a quick email when you're creating a task to a user. Instead of using their email address, you could just use their user ID. Okay, so I created a tiny URL that you can go to and hopefully it works. And so we can now walk through creating. So I'm just gonna escape this and let's see. Are you seeing my new screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me reshare it really quick.
Now we can. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hopefully everyone could access that GIST. So we're gonna just kind of go through the setup. So, okay, good, still logged in. So email services are under custom code. And since we have a lot of time, I was gonna go through and just create a new one. So before you can even create an email service, you would create this class. So let's just go ahead and do that. And we can rename it. We can just leave it as that, my handler. Okay. Now going back to our email services. So when creating an email service, we need to give it a unique name. We can call it anything unique to us. I'm just gonna call it the demo name. And then here is where you would have the class. And this is how you connect the email service to the Apex code that you're running. If we were going to do an attachments, we would do attachments here. So you can do a text attachment, binary attachments, or all attachments, but we won't do attachments for this purpose. And then there's advanced email security that I was talking about. So basically how the user is sending it to you, we could check that box and they have all that information here where they'll use like the domain keys, the protocols, and all that good stuff. So this accept email from, this is very important. If you want to accept emails from a specific domain, so you want to keep it specifically to your client or to your work, this is where you would put that domain. Or maybe you're only accepting emails for specific people, because that's also critical. I think we have something in the chat. Do you need one class per service? You can reuse a class if you make it generic enough to as many email services as you need. You just have to mention the class. So if you had 2 email services and you had one specific class that's doing all the heavy lifting, you can have both of those classes. So I'm going to leave this blank. And by leaving it blank, it means that whoever emails me, anyone off the internet, they will get that email service. But I'll show you again how to lock it down as well. And so then this is if we had attachments, if we wanted to convert the text to binary, we don't want to do that. And then we want to make it active. So failure responses. So if we're over the email rate, it'll tell us if we want to bounce the message, discard it, requeue it. So maybe we want to requeue because we know that our limits are low. What happens if you deactivate an email address? We can, again, discard, requeue. And there's just a long list of things. This one is quite important. So as a developer, you would want to have this routed to maybe an alias. So if you're the only developer, you'd want it to be routed to yourself. So if you have any issues, you can quickly get them and they won't go back to your sender. Actually, let me use my Outlook. Outlook.com. So once we save that and we activate it, we have to activate it. That's what the email service will look like. Now, each email service can have several email addresses. So again, this is the address that you would put in your reply to, so that when a user hits reply, it goes to this specific email address. When moving to production, you would need to set up this email address in production. It will not carry over in your chain set or your migrations. So we'll call this contacts. And then it's asking what the email address should start as. Now, Salesforce, when I hit save, it'll generate a long string for us, and we'll just keep it as that. And now this context user, this is important too. So maybe for your email service, you have a specific user, like you have a integration user that you want to have the code run as, or maybe you want to keep it really secure and you created a specific user. So here's where you would set that, and that user would have enough permissions to run the email service. So this is just a test org, so I think I'm the only user in here, so it will be me. And then again, we can set for this specific email address, who should we accept emails from? I'm not going to put nobody because I'm using a different email address tonight. But if you didn't want to have emails from random people, you would set it here. Likewise, for each email address, you can have it to a specific person. So if you had my contacts 2, my contacts 3, you could set it so you could have different domains from each email. So when I hit save, this, hopefully you can see, is what my email address would look like. And if we go back into view, made sure that I activated it, we're not accepting it from anyone. So now this is our email address that we would use. And you can have several email addresses per email service. All right, so let's get into the code. I'm going to just use developer console tonight, and hopefully you can see my developer console. Let me know if you can't see it.
I'm not seeing it. Not yet.
Okay. But I don't think I'm sharing my whole screen. Let me try again. Let's try share desktop.
Here we go.
Think maybe, okay, good. All right. Let's do it as a split screen so that we can see the gist. Are we seeing the split screen? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we have a global class and we're implementing the message in inbound email handler. In this global class, we have its constructor that has 2 methods, inbound email and inbound email envelope. So we are on step 3. So let's copy some code. Hopefully it's correct. And sorry about the formatting. When I was creating the gist, some of it's a little bit misaligned. Okay, so we did not need this one. And I like to move the initialization down here. So we have string variables, string body, subject, and email address. And so for the body, we're going to call the email method, and we're going to get the plain text body. We're going to get the subject, and then we're going to get the from address. And so here is where we get the results that will pass or fail for the class. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find a contact. And since we already have the email address here, we're going to do a select ID. name, email, owner ID from contact, where email equals email address limit 1. Okay, save. And so for this fictitious email address, I wanted to go on and also create 5 related follow-up tasks. Okay, so we have a for loop, starting at index 0. I think I want to start at 1 since I'm including 5. And then we just have a simple task where we're getting the description, the priority, the subject, the status, the subject, a reminder, and then the activity date. So we want each activity to be today plus a day. So 5 days into the future. And okay, task list does not, this is what happens when I copy and paste. So definitely need the list. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have the list, we're adding it to this task list. And now we need to insert it. Okay, so for the insert, instead of a try catch, I'm going to use the I'm definitely missing a section. 1 second. There we go. I need to fix that on that gist. Okay, so we're going to use the database.save results class. And then we're going to do error checking on that list. So if we have any failures, we're going to add them to a string that I need to add at the top. And then we're going to system debug. Now, normally I would, instead of doing a system debug here, I would actually do a email to like a administrator or to myself. And the only reason why is because when it's live in production, no one's running debug logs. So no one's looking for system debug. So if the logs aren't on, even if the errors are being caught, no one's going to actively get it unless the users are sending help, something's wrong, where it's my emails. But usually this is how I do it instead of the try catch. That way, if we have a partial failure, we can still have some successes. And then we can get all the errors instead of just getting that first error, if that makes sense. Okay, so far so good. So I don't know if anyone caught what I did, and it's okay if you didn't because you have to have a trained eye, but this will error out in production. If the email address doesn't exist, even though I'm doing limit 1, the list will be empty and it will come back with a so-called error list has no rows. But the reason why I'm doing this is I want to show you the error that can occur so that you can know what to look for. So let's try and test out our email service so that we can get that error. So I'm going to come off a split screen for a little bit. So, oh, we need to grab the email service really quick. So this is the address here. Then we're going to have it set to 2, like a regular address. And then we're going to have a subject, group, email, service test. I'm going to do hi. this. Just a test. So what we're hoping to happen is when I hit send, the email service is going to see, oh, I have this email address. It's connected to that My Handler class. It's going to try and find the contact. Once it finds the contact, it's going to try to create those tasks. What I'm hoping to happen, though, is that it fails because my email address doesn't exist. Hopefully this one doesn't exist in Salesforce. And so we didn't tell the class specifically, hey, this address doesn't exist. What should I do? Okay, so let's hit send. And let's give it a minute and see if I get an error back. Sometimes Outlook takes a little bit. While we're waiting for it, let's just make sure I don't have that email address in here. I think Outlook's taking a little bit to come back, but I can show you from my other email because I tested it earlier today. I can find it. Okay, so hopefully you can see what I'm sharing. So this is the error that I was expecting to come back, where it says the name of the Apex class, the error. It's going to say couldn't attach. It's going to tell you the line. It's going to tell you which email address failed. So that's very useful if you have several. And some other good, useful things. Any questions so far?
Seems like we're good.
Okay. Maybe I should have tested with Outlook. It'll come eventually. So then let's move on. Because the contact definitely did not create. So I think the error is just a little delayed. So we need to fix that issue. So I'm going to go to the final one. And we're going to just copy this little chunk of code so that we can examine it. Okay. So, and I should have a contact list. Just copy paste. Okay, let's try again. Okay, great. So I added a contact list and then I added a contact. I didn't initialize it as yet, and you'll see why. So first I put that list, that contact list that we talked about earlier, with a limit 1, just in case we have several. And we're going to check the list to see if it's empty. So if it's not empty, we're going to get the first index. And we know there's only one in there because we limited it to one. But if it is empty, we're going to create a new contact. So we're going to initialize that contact. So we need a first name and last name. So I did some string methods here on the from name, which is another method in that inbound email. So we're getting the first name up until the space, and then we're getting everything after the space. If someone had 3 names, it might not work as well, but I know mine's just Nadina space Lisbon. But that's something you would want to test and check the requirements on. We know a contact always has to have a last name, so even if we get bad data, at least if we get the last name, so we don't have any failures there. Then we have the email address from the inbound email, and we're going to insert that current contact. So once we're 100% sure now that we have a contact, and this will not fail, move back on to our tasks, where we'll have those 5 tasks, and we'll attach them to the contact. So let's try again. Still hoping that that error comes in, but maybe not. Oh, there it is. Just so you can see what it looks like. And it looks the same in Gmail, but this one's specific to the class that I just created. And then the system query exception list has no rows for assignment to S object. And that's an error that always happens when you directly query, when you query the database and you return a list and there's no rows. So it didn't get back anything. Okay, so I'm going to let me go into Salesforce and copy the email service from here so we don't mess it up. So this time, we're hoping that it's going to be successful. And it might take a little time to process. Another way that you can debug email services, if you know what you're looking for, you can turn on the debug logs for that specific class or for the specific user if you created a user, that context user that we created earlier. So here I am. And then here are all my tasks. And so that is email services in a nutshell. Let me see if I have anything more on my presentation. Yeah, so that's it. Questions?
No? When we're done with the meeting, can you post the references and the tiny URL link in the community for all of us?
Yes.
Awesome. So Susanna asked, are you using email services today at your work?
I haven't used it yet. I used it at my previous job, but we're trying to find applications where we can use it, but we might have to do API calls for that. They're a little nifty little tool just to know about, because sometimes you don't use them often, but when you do need to use them, it's good to know how to implement and how to use them.
If you guys have questions, just go ahead and shout them out. This is the freeform area of the meeting.
The use case for my previous job, we had a approval process, and we needed to recreate it. We needed to recreate it because during the approval process, when you get that first approved by email, we had a follow-up email that would go out, but because it wasn't technically part of the approval process, we had people approving that email. So what we did is we created the email service, and we had their reply go to the email service. So it looked streamlined, that it was part of the approval process, even though it wasn't.
And with that, we're at the end. Have you ever needed to create contact records based on contact information and messages? Would it be useful to associate multiple Salesforce-generated email addresses with the email service, or identify a user based on that person's email address? How are you using email services in your org? Comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it to this point, we want to take an opportunity to say thank you. Since you stayed with us, here's a bonus. Email service addresses that you create in your sandbox cannot be copied to your production org. Also, Salesforce limits the total number of messages that all email services combined can process daily. The calculations are based around the number of user licenses, so if you have a smaller org, I would keep that in mind. Thank you for spending time with us. Make sure you like this video. It helps a lot. Click subscribe and on the notification bell so you never miss another video. We also handpick these videos, which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on Instagram, Twitter, and on our website at 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.